Okay, so I'm going to tell you why the pre-trib rapture people hate me. And they want to kill me. I'll explain why. And they know it's wrong to kill, and they know it's wrong to hate. So what they say is that I have to go through the tribulation and have my head cut off, and have my blood spilled to atone for my own sins. They say that out of spite and vengeance, because it doesn't say anything like that in the Bible. Give me a break. They've made all this up out of vengeance against those who are saying that the pre-trib rapture is a heresy. And so they're wishing this upon us, this witchcraft and vengeance. So, but I'm going to explain it to you by a biblical example where they did the same to Paul. Here it is. It's in Acts 19:21 when he was in Ephesus. And in Ephesus, that was the largest center of the cult of Diana, the goddess Diana. The statue for Diana was one of the seven wonders of the world. It was a gigantic statue. And if you look up the seven wonders of the world, the statue of Diana at Ephesus was one of them. It was a gigantic cult, just like the pre-trib rapture believers are a worldwide cult that's infested almost every denomination. This is the same kind of thing, except they are focused on a specific goddess. Well, I mean, they're focused on a specific God named Jesus, who isn't the Jesus of the Bible. Really, he's not. He's not the Jesus of the Bible, because they're making up a completely parallel gospel that sounds like the gospel of Jesus, but it isn't. When you inquire into it, you find out it's not, because it requires that you believe in a pre-trib rapture in order to be saved. Otherwise, you're not going to be saved. And that's not the gospel of Jesus. So, let's keep going. Verse 21 of Acts 19. After these things were ended, Paul purposed in the Spirit, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. So he sent into Macedonia two of them that ministered unto him, Timotheus and Erastus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season. Now, Asia, what's called Asia, was Asia Minor, and it was a Turkey. So that's where you have a lot of the biblical places are in Turkey, especially along the west coast there and the southern coast. In fact, Paul was from Turkey. He was Turkish. He was really Roman citizen. That's because that part of Turkey was part of the Roman Empire when he was born. So it says here, but he himself stayed in Asia for a season, maybe visiting his relatives. And the same time there arose no small stir about that way. So somewhere along the way where Paul was, there was a stir, and it was not small. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen. He brought in a big amount of revenue for the craftsmen. He himself, the silversmith who built shrines for Diana, whom he called together these craftsmen, who he makes all this money for them. He calls them together with the workmen of like occupations, similar occupations, idolatry, they're building idols, shrines, and said, sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. So there you go. By this craft that we do of making idols to Diana, we have this wealth, our wealth. Moreover, ye see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods, which are made with hands. He's turned away people all across Asia, telling them that anything that's made with human hands is not a god. And that completely destroys their industry then, right? It undermines the credibility of their industry. Verse 27. So that not only this, our craft is in danger to be set at naught, like to be obliterated, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised. He's slandering their God. and her magnificence should be destroyed. That he's trying to destroy her magnificence, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. Worshipeth isn't past tense, it's present tense, worships. So he's like, the whole world worships Diana, and he's trying to destroy the goddess of the entire world. Let's save the world. Yeah, that's the tone of it. And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. All these craftsmen who are meeting with him, who are getting rich off of this, and even ones who are doing parallel or like accessory, like complementary crafts. And the whole city was filled with confusion. And having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not, like didn't tolerate him to go. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. So he knew some of the officials, the governing officials in Asia there. And so they said, no, we really don't want you to go in there. And some therefore cried one thing and some another, for the assembly was confused. So all these craftsmen and the people from the city, and they were all confused and they're crying different things. And the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. So most of them didn't even know why they were there. They were just there yelling things. All right. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward. And Alexander beckoned with the hand and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice, about the space of 2 hours, cried out, Great is Diana of the Ephesians, because he was Jewish, because they knew that he worshipped the living God. Not Diana, who was an idol made of hands. 35. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, calm down. So after 2 hours of this, he finally got them to calm down. Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? So that's what they claim, is that statue fell from Jupiter. Not Jupiter the planet, Jupiter the god, Zeus. Jupiter is you got Jupiter, you got Zeus. It's Roman and Greek. Jupiter is the Roman. 36. Seeing then that these things cannot be spoken against, ye ought to be quiet and to do nothing rashly. He's saying, since you know that Diana, the statue of Diana, fell down from heaven from Jupiter, Zeus, you know that no one can successfully speak against it. So just don't do anything rash, right? Be quiet, don't do anything rash. For ye have brought hither these men. You brought in here these men, which are neither robbers of churches, nor yet blasphemers of your goddess. They haven't blasphemed your goddess yet. Wherefore, if Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open. And there are deputies. Let them implead one another. So take it to court. If you have a dispute, take it to court. 39. But if ye inquire anything concerning these other matters, it shall be determined in a lawful assembly, not here in a lynching mob, right? So even back then, they were against this kind of thing. They wanted it to be lawful, at least in Asia, in Ephesus. 40. For we are in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar. He was speaking for those who worship Diana, saying that you're going to bring, blame on their cult for this. For we are in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar, there being no cause whereby we may give an account of this concourse. We don't have any reason for doing this. We can't give some excuse. What's the excuse for us doing this? And we caused it. We're going to be held accountable for it. And when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly. And they shouldn't have separated this into another chapter, because the next verse is part of this. And after the uproar was ceased, Paul called unto him the disciples and embraced them and departed for to go into Macedonia. That should be the end of the chapter, but this is the first verse of the next chapter. Because the next verse goes, and when he had gone over those parts and had given them much exhortation, he came into Greece. So, and even that could be part of the end of the last chapter. But anyway, you get the point. This is the same thing with the pre-trib rapture people. They've got their idol that they've set up. They don't have some sort of giant statue that they claim fell down from Jupiter or Zeus or anyone else. Or the great rock that the Muslims worship. There was a meteorite that has pagan gods carved all over it. They don't have anything like that. But that doesn't make them any less idolaters. And they are idolaters. And you can tell. When you tell them the truth, you just simply read the scriptures, they get angry with you. They get angry and start swearing at you and start cursing at you and start threatening you and wishing horrible things to you, like being beheaded and spilling your blood and all this kind of stuff. It's horrible. I'm shocked. I never thought that I would hear people who claim to be Christians say that to other Christians. I'm in shock. But then again, that goes to show that they're not really Christians. They're only wearing the sheep's clothing. They're not really Christians because they're speaking like wolves, not Christians. Really. And I'm not saying that just because they're criticizing. I'm saying that because of what they're wishing upon people who don't believe in their God, the pre-trib rapture. That's their God, not Jesus, not God the Father. They say that is, but that's not what they act like. They act like the pre-trib rapture is above them, above God the Father, above Jesus. Because that's more important than anything that God ever said. They've proven that. And you can go back. I'm not full of hot air. I'm saying this from experience, and those of you who've been on the channel for a while, you know it's true. Back June 17th, I started looking into the pre-tribulation rapture. And you can see, you can follow my videos step by step through it. And you can see that God was revealing and showing me exactly in Scripture exactly what he's saying. And it's without a doubt. It's indisputable. When he says this is the first resurrection, and it's after the tribulation, and also it mentions those who were killed in the tribulation. It even says so. It says that these will be raised from the dead, and this is the first tribulation, or first resurrection. Tribulation. My tongue's dry. So I could use a little bit of water. But it's as clear as day. And you say, well, what does that have to do with the pre-trib rapture? It's a rapture, not a resurrection. Yeah, it is a resurrection. In fact, the rapture happens because the resurrection happens. The resurrection happens just before, immediately preceding the rapture, because both of them are raptured together. Those who were raised from the dead and those who are still alive at the time of Jesus' coming. That's what it says in Thessalonians. Go read it. So you got to know that in order to recognize in Revelation 24 through 6, when it mentions those who were beheaded during the tribulation for not taking the mark of the beast, and they will be raised from the dead, and this is the first resurrection. And people argue, well, there are other resurrections before that, like the ones who raised from the dead when Jesus died on the cross, and when the girl was raised from the dead, and Lazarus was raised from the dead, and the two witnesses are raised from the dead. Then they say Enoch and Elijah, they weren't raised from the dead. They weren't raised from the dead. But here's the thing, is that they argue with God. God's the one who said that's the first resurrection. And yet they want to argue with God. Instead of trying to figure out, well, why did God call that the first resurrection if there were these other resurrections before that? What's the difference? That proves that they don't really believe what God says. They want what God says to agree with what they think and what they believe and their system that they have bet everything on. They're not like here on the channel where I tell you again and again, hold like this what you believe as we read the testimony of God. Because you're going to find some things need to change. You need to let the testimony of God change that out. Because there's some things that are wrong. And I have had to have things changed out as well. Things that I was told by men, and I took it because I didn't know any better. But as I'm reading the testimony of God, I'm finding it's not the same as what's written there. And so as I'm reading that, I'm letting God change that out, what these men whispered in my ear or even tried to brainwash me with. So you need to do the same thing. The pre-trib rapture believers do as well. Some of them will. Some on the channel used to be pre-trib rapture believers, and they've escaped it. So you can too, if you are pre-trib rapture listening to this. And you don't need to bet all of your ego on it. Your ego should have nothing to do with it. That shouldn't enter the formula whatsoever. About your beliefs of doctrine and how to live the Christian life and who God is and what the truths are about the future, that should have nothing to do with your ego. You should have no ego in that at all. You shouldn't. And you know you shouldn't, so of course you're going to say, well, I don't. And you say it with ego too. That's the irony. You know, like Andrea, child of the Most High. It's like ego in everything that she says. You know, and Disciple Robert is more subtle, but you can detect it if you watch very carefully. You can detect it there as well. So, no ego, all right? No ego. We need to let the testimony of God rule over our beliefs, over our persuasion, our faith. May the Lord bless you as you seek Him with all your heart.